on brandlive.co.za.
Good morning, South Africa. Welcome to the Social Show, your one-stop shop of all things CSI and CSR. Now, if you don't know what's going on, I am here to fill you in as to what our corporate's doing for our country, what is our government doing for our country, and you need not do anything. Just sit and hear and understand, and maybe you could pitch in. Start an NGO today. Wake up, start an NGO. Wake up, start an NPO. Do something in your community, in your immediate community, and that's what we want to do. Make sure that you feel inspired to change the circumstances of our country. Anyway, as usual, I'm going to start off the day with the news. Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries Minister Senzeni Zokwana has commended a farming project which harnesses the power of the sun to grow vegetables. The minister visited the sun farming project situated at Northwest University in Potchefstroom on Tuesday last week. The solar power vegetable growing project was born from a partnership between Sun Farming and University of Potchefstroom in 2013, establishing the first solar training center in South Africa. The center has trained over 450 people since 2013, providing skills on solar photovoltaic technology. The project began production in June 2016, producing tomatoes, spinach, cauliflower and other herbs. No soil is required to grow vegetables in the project's tunnels, and water productivity is increased through drip irrigation. The project has 3 tunnels with 6 young women trained per tunnel. Solar tunnel production has much higher yields compared to conventional farming. Professor Fika Janse van Rensburg, the University of Northwest Potchefstroom campus rector, has said that the Northwest province is blessed with a lot of sunshine, and all that was needed was a creative, innovative mind to come up with great initiatives to make use of the sunlight in order to increase agricultural production. In other news on the same strand, the Agricultural Sector Education and Training Authority, AgriSETA, has become the latest training authority to be embroiled in allegations of maladministration, corruption and inefficiency. The public protector is in the process of finalizing a report relating to allegations of maladministration, corruption, financial mismanagement and abuse of power at the AgriSETA. Some board members, including acting chairman Tamika Palaiki and CEO Jerry Madiba, were implicated for allegedly submitting fraudulent claims, allocating discretionary funds for gala dinners without board approval, and fictitious deviations for transactions to cover up illegal transactions. Kapalaki and Madiba has not returned phone calls for comment. SETAs have previously been criticized for their inefficiency, having been under a lot of corruption watch and for enrolling ghost students. They have come under fire for failing to tackle essay skills deficit. Others, such as the culture, arts, tourism, hospitality and sports SETA, and the safety and security services SETA, have been under administration for reasons including poor governance, non-compliance with a Public Finance Management Act, which is FEMA. Lastly, in our news, 2 of the world's richest men, Bill Gates and Aliko Dangote, have spread their philanthropic wings to drive basic healthcare and disease prevention in Africa. This past week, more than 100,000 vaccinators will be fanned out across 5 African countries in the Lake Chad area in a push to eliminate polio in Africa and rid the world of this terrible disease forever. They will take boats across fast-flowing rivers, ride jeeps along sandy ravines, walk crowded streets in towns and cities, and navigate cramped quarters of refugee camps to ensure that every child is immunized. Traveling for hours a day, these dedicated women and men will visit children in homes, schools, train stations, transit points across Nigeria and Niger, Chad, Cameroon, and Central African Republic. Thanks to the effort of so many, Nigeria's Borno state is now the only place in Africa today where polio is still circulating. It will take ingenuity to end polio there, and it will take persistence to continue reaching children in the surrounding areas with vaccines to protect them from the disease until it is eradicated. But they have said, the 2 richest men rather have said that they are confident it can be done, and when it happens, Africa will celebrate one of the biggest victories ever in public health. And that concludes my news for the day. South Africa has observed their Workers' Day on the 1st of May, and I'm sure you all had a great long weekend. I did. I was not at work on the 1st of May, and I hope a lot of you weren't as well, because it's a very important day. It's a day for you to really feel, the support that you have around you in terms of like the government understanding the kind of, stress you go through, I guess. But we've observed it on the 1st of May. It's also known as May Day. And obviously, it originated within the historical struggles of workers and their trade unions for solidarity between working people and in their struggles to achieve fair employment standards. Now, this included the need to establish a culture of human and worker rights, which are enshrined in international law and in national law of the countries aligned with the International Labour Organization of South Africa, which is a member of that delegation of national and international law. In South Africa, Workers' Day has been officially observed since 1994, obviously in par with democratic elections, and the government remains committed to ensuring the welfare and good conditions of services for workers. So basically, the government has put in place progressive labour legislation and key programs in line with the Constitution. And labour law sort of prevents discrimination and, more importantly, obviously, workplace discrimination. And last year we used to speak a lot about discrimination against people who are disabled and people who are suffering some sort of ability or disability, as to how they sort of are treated at work and how they navigate their way around work. And I thought it was quite an interesting discussion to see how many businesses, which are big and I mean are really running South Africa from a corporate perspective, are tolerant of people with disabilities. Not even tolerant maybe is the wrong word to use, but how many businesses have in fact incorporated structures and specific changes to their infrastructure, to the way that they text. Not text, but like email, and how many people have put in place structures that would accommodate people with disabilities. And that's one of the issues around labor law and the Constitution, and why it's so important that we have Workers' Day and we understand what Workers' Day means, and we understand that anybody who is a worker or is part of the labor force needs to be treated with the same respect, with the same level of professionalism, and also needs to be accommodated as to whatever it is they may be lacking in. Sometimes we're always, and I mean, how many times do you go to an interview, for instance, for a new job, and you just feel like they're looking for a superhuman? They're not really looking at you as a human being who would try their best to make sure that whatever it is you need to do is aligned to what skills you have. It's almost like these superhuman I don't want to say gods, but like that's the kind of thing you get. And I can't imagine an interview process for somebody who can't see, who can't speak properly, or can't walk. I mean, that must be another level. So I can imagine, and I wonder if there are proper ways of interviewing people with disabilities, because at the end of the day, we have to be more inclusive, and we have to make sure that everybody can make a living. Your ability or your disability should not prohibit you from making a living, and that's a few of the things. So listen, Chapter 2 of the Constitution contains several provisions of relevance to employment and labor law. So this is what you basically need to know, the basics of what labor law stands for. And I'm saying this for a reason, because I think very few people know their rights. I think very few people know which associations, especially in the corporate space, which trade unions they can join, or not even like just which affiliations or institutions or even NGOs they can join to protect their rights. And not just from a legal perspective as to getting a lawyer and all that stuff, because that can be expensive, but also in a sense of saying, I'm a worker and what are my rights, and how can I make sure that my rights are observed, are respected, and are maintained at all times without me losing my job. So there's a lot of different organizations that are doing that. But anyway, as I was saying, The Constitution contains several provisions of relevance to employment and labor law. Now, the first is the right to equality, obviously, protection of dignity, protection against servitude, forced labor, and discrimination, the right to pursue a livelihood, and protection for children against exploitative labor practices and work that is hazardous to their well-being. And it's also important, it's an important thing to know. And this is a few of the provisions that our constitution has in regard to employment and labor law. However, what I love is that we have such a robust working economy, working class in South Africa, and I'm talking from minimum wage to the highest paid. Okay, maybe not the highest paid, but I mean to sort of average, paid human beings in South Africa. And whenever I think of what Workers' Day for me would stand for, and what I would think of when I want to celebrate Workers' Day, or what I would think of when I wanted to, relate it to, where we are as a country, I look at strikes, and I look at how many strikes we're getting a year. I look at how many people aren't happy, how many people aren't being paid enough, and what is, what is the livelihood of the person who is doing, the really, really hectic work, like in the mines or in construction, all of these really heavy duty, really high risk, but low paying jobs. How are we protecting those people? And you find that a lot. You find a lot of unhappiness through the strikes and through the sort of this voice that comes out of people. I know there was a bus strike quite recently in Johannesburg, which was a lot of people didn't prepare for it because it just came like that. But so specific negotiations need to be met, and specific changes need to be made. We can't just have one system working for everybody all the time. It doesn't. It worked at some point, and now people realize that the cost of living is getting worse. I mean, we've just been declared, basically under junk status. So there's a lot of different things that will be affecting, especially the people who aren't making enough money to sustain their lives currently, but can see that, the money that they're going to make is going to actually become less and less helpful in terms of how they deal with their family structures, how they deal with their health, how they deal with their food security. There's so many things that being a worker secures, and being a healthy worker will eventually turn this country into so it's very important that we know that we are celebrating on Workers' Day those who have triumphed and those who have gone far and beyond to challenge corporates, to challenge those in the private and public sectors, to say, yes, I understand that you are my employer, and I understand that you have given me this job, and jobs are hard. I mean, if you think of the unemployment rate, jobs are really difficult to find. But we're saying that, yes, we understand that you have given us this opportunity, but understand that we're human beings and we work in a specific way, and we also need to improve and progress and be better. And I think that's what Workers' Day, for me anyway, stands for and will always stand for. Anyway, I'm just going to jump to the 15th of November 2014, which is a good example of not a good example of what can happen when I think employees start taking charge of their lives, but also just a good example of what can happen if you leave a situation or you don't engage or try and progress with your employees in a natural way, and also in a way that is truthful and transparent, and in a way that is honest, and in a way that is beneficial for both parties. I'm not saying give your workers more than they deserve. I'm saying give them enough to survive, and then give them more when they do well. And that's what it's about, right? It's about making sure that the cost of living is parallel to the kind of job you have. You can't have a job that doesn't support your basic fundamentals, which I have already spoken about, which is food security, health, and just a home, having to secure a home. So as I said, I'm just going to jump onto the 15th of November 2014, a day that I will never forget, a day I remember I was I was knee deep in my honors at Wits at that time, and I remember watching the miners shot down a documentary with my school and partaking in different ways of trying to help the miners who were shot and those who were in jail, and being a little bit of an activist in my own right. But anyway, workers at the South African major platinum producers, which is Anglo American Platinum, Impala Platinum, and Lonmin, went on a strike demanding that wages be immediately doubled. However, after like 5 months of striking, they settled for a modest pay increase spread over 3 years, and it has been said it was the longest and most expensive strike in South African history. The strike apparently cost the platinum industry around 1.2 million ounces of production, with about 24 billion rand. Amplats estimated it had lost 11 billion rand in revenue, and the company spent about 2.4 billion rand on overhead on mines closed during the strike. Additional losses were expected, while companies paid full wages but experienced less than full production while production ramped back up. Now, an implant executive commented that the strike had been enormously damaging. It had destroyed relationships that they had with employees, relationships that they had with communities, the union, and the government, and it resulted in them taking an untold financial they just lost a lot of money basically. And from a worker's perspective, the workers who, obviously we all know already lived in poverty, lost over 11 billion rand in wages. One worker actually described the strike as really tough, as saying that he depended on family and charity for food. And that's also another place where we find a lot of NPOs coming in. Disaster relief is usually paired with droughts, some sort of natural caused disaster, but also there are a lot of man-made disasters where you need disaster relief. And I love the fact that in this space, charities and families all around South Africa came together to help those who had been affected quite severely by the strike. The strike needed to happen, although to this day the truth has not been told as to why so many people died, who ordered the shots, and all those kinds of things. And I don't want to get into that, although it's a very big part of employees not being happy and employee not being satisfied with the kind of money that they want, and not being able to voice that in a way that is being heard. Because I do think and I believe that these conversations were conversations between obviously the mine corporations, as well as the employees and those who were actually digging and were risking their lives. Those conversations were put under the rug, and really sort of not really being spoken about for a long time. And so this was a sort of an eruption of emotion, an eruption of circumstance, and it happened. And thank God we have the disaster relief charity, which we all love and we all know as Gift of the Givers, and they had spent around 3.4 million rand on food parcels and medical care for strikers by early June. And the strike also caused a substantial increase in the number of stray animals in Rustenburg, as people abandoned pets as they could no longer afford to feed. So going back to my point of what Workers' Day means that we need to be able to have transparent conversations with those that employ us, so that we can tell them our needs and make sure that something like this does not happen again, because it has such a ripple effect, not only on the employee and their jobs and their relationship with the mines, but also their families. There's food security for their families and the food security in the community. Because remember, you even though there's somebody working at Lonmin, for instance, and supporting their family, that family has and knowing the kind of culture we have in South Africa as Africans, that family probably supports another family that's worse off. So when that ripple effect or that chain sort of gets cut, you're cutting off a lifeline to a lot of different people. And that makes sense as to how many estranged pets there was in Rustenburg area, because it just shows that we all work in this sort of ecosystem, and that when one, water tank or one source of energy is cut off, it impacts the entire space. And if you look at it that way, you could flip it and also say that if you do right by your employees, and if you are responsible with your practices. I mean, mines have, especially Anglo America, has been in total trouble because of the kinds of inconsistencies in their responsibility tactics as to how they mine and so forth. But if they were to, be responsible just a little bit more and be more, I think, realistic as to how they pay their employees, and how they can how they understand that to be enough money to sustain a living. I'm sure no one in that space has ever even worked for that amount of money. So it's all about having that great communication, and if that was communicated well, that would have also had a positive ripple effect against, not even against, but with the communities, with more animals being taken in, because they've got more food to give around, more opportunities for young people to go to school. There's so many ripple effects as to when workers are happy, and not saying they'll always be happy or they're always right. I'm not saying workers will always be right, but I'm saying that could have been avoided so easily if, the conversations had been had long before the strike happened. So, anyway, I just wanted to also just give a really big shout out to the Gift of the Givers, who is, if you don't know, it's a South African non-governmental organization which was started by Dr. Emetius Suliman in 1992, and it is the largest disaster relief group of African origin. Gift of the Givers has worked in many countries around the world, including Bosnia, Pakistan, Somalia, Haiti, Zimbabwe. And during the aftermath of the 2010 Haiti earthquake, the organization sent 4 rescue teams and aid materials to the country. So Gift of the Givers is definitely one of those NGOs that I wanted to really give props to when that happened, in terms of the miners' strike in Lonmin, who really did the best they could to make sure that the families didn't die of starvation, didn't die of malnutrition, and that they had some sort of security, and they could prolong and carry on striking. I mean, 5 months of striking is long, and the way it ended is sad, and didn't need to end in the way that it did. But I can't imagine how those families would have survived without the Gift of the Givers, which is a great foundation which comes from South Africa, and they're doing so many beautiful things in Syria at the moment, and they are just really, really one of the best when it comes to disaster relief, especially man-made as well. Whether it's war and whether it's a strike. And remember, that's what Workers' Day is about. It's about remembering all those who are trying to change the way in which I think workers are treated in South Africa. Black workers are treated in South Africa. Also trying to change the way in which the corporates look at investing, and how they invest, not only investing their money but also socially, how are they investing in the community, and also what responsibilities they have to the people that they are working for them. And that's what Workers' Day meant for me, and I hope that's what it meant for you. I hope you didn't just sort of sit down. I hope you did have a good time, but I also hope you realize that, there's a lot of people who have fought and who are still fighting to make sure that, one, we are equal in pay as women. Women get equal pay. That, there's no difference between a black and a white economist. There's no difference in pay. There's no difference between there's no like basically like corruption when it comes to paying people who are working in low wage, or rather in terms of like laborers and those who are not necessarily in the corporate space but are working in the the softer areas. And I hope that that's what it meant for you. It meant that we are still trying as a country to make sure that people are at peace and are happy and can work and can live on the kind of salaries that they're getting. And we just hope that there's be less corruption, and there's going to be more compensation and more money that can be made to make sure that our workers and our entrepreneurs are safe and feel as though that they are responsible and have an impact in their immediate community. And that wraps up my show for the day. If you have any comments on Workers' Day and what it meant for you, if any thoughts about what it means to be a worker, how you feel about the current job that you have, the current relationship you have with your employer, is it transparent? Do you still feel like there's a lot that needs to be done for you to feel like a happy, jovial worker? Obviously, there are a lot of issues as to why you're doing whatever you are doing in your job, but I'm just talking about the structure and the feeling and the NGOs and the institutions that you're a part of that protect you from being let go, or not being able to strike, and not having your voice being heard, basically. But thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all again bright and early tomorrow morning.
Live from 27 Boxes in the heart of Melville, this is brandlive.co.za.